Sports Talk Chicago. Here with Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's a three-time All-Star, four-time Gold Glove Award winner, and the host of the Boone Podcast. Please welcome Bret Boone to the program. Bret, great to have you on again. How are you?
Hey, Johnny. How you doing? Good to be here.
I'm doing great. Yeah, thanks for being here. What's your take on the postseason, first off?
Well, I couldn't be more incorrect at my analysis going into the postseason. And it's interesting when you think about it and how we've gotten to this point, baseball wise. I want to say I think it's great for the game how it's set up now. So many teams, so many cities get to be in the hunt a lot longer. In past years, 10, 20, 15, 20 years ago, come September, a lot of teams were eliminated. I think with the new format and the way the postseason is set up, I think it's great for baseball because the fans can engage for a longer time. That being said, it makes it a little tougher for the best teams to be standing at the end because there are, and I call them landmines in the postseason now. There's so many, that 162 is such a grind. And usually the best team is that team that's winning 106 games, 107 games this year, like the Dodgers and the Giants, and they're nowhere to be seen now. So, the parity's great. I think in the last 20 years, you've had 16 different teams win the World Series. Don't quote me on it, but I think that's close number. So I think the parity's great. I was a big, I don't know if I want to say, I was a critic of Bud Selig when he took over in the 90s. I was one of his biggest critic in the early 90s when we got the World Series canceled. Now looking back on that and where baseball is now, I think Bud Selig did a very good job, and that was the parity in the game. I think he's done really well. It might not be the biggest rated series for the TV stations, but I'll tell you what, the Atlanta Braves and the Houston Astros, I think, are going to give you a great finish in this World Series this year.
Who do you think ends up winning it?
Man, you want me to predict? I've been wrong all the way up until now. All right, I'm going to go back to on paper. Looks good so far for me, but I think the National League, from a starting pitching standpoint, is the stronger, especially with McCullers being out now after game one. Morton's out, so they're kind of tit for tat. This Atlanta ball club, man, they're hot. I think as far as the best offensive team, the best team, I think it's the Houston Astros. The best starting pitching, I think it's the Atlanta Braves. And in the end, I always go with the starting pitching. Now, Morton he's out now, so that changes my thought process if you would have asked me 24 hours ago. But I think the National League, whoever we're going to make it in, I think they had the advantage, and I'm going to stick with that, but I'll probably be wrong. So everybody out there watching, go to Vegas and put your money on Houston.
How surprising is Atlanta's run? I mean, they went from losing Acuna, now they've lost Morton too. They won 88 games, worst team to make the playoffs from the National League, and now they're in the World Series. What do you think about it?
Well, I just think that, Riley's been so good for him. Freeman is obviously a former MVP. He started off real cold. Now he's the Freeman we know. Albies at second base. Man, he causes a lot of problems for opposing defenses on the base pass. Rosario, there's always a hero that emerges, and Rosario was about as locked in, and he won the MVP, getting to the World Series in the NLCS. They're as hot as anybody right now. I wouldn't want to mess with them. Now, you go over 162 games, I'll take that Houston ball club offensively, but I think in short term, hot Jock Peterson's had some postseason magic. So I think Atlanta's got everything pointed in the right direction right now. They're going to be tough to beat. I'll never count out Houston. What went down a few years back and the way they've come back from that adversity. I'll never count them out. I think it should be a great World Series.
Bret Boone here on Sports Talk Chicago. Bret, who's been the biggest disappointment of the playoffs so far?
For me, it's the LA Dodgers. It's an easy answer. I think that on paper, they had the best team in baseball, from offense to defense to the bullpen to the starting rotation. And I watched them, and as a baseball purist, I just looked at it and I said, you got the best team, you got the best starting rotation, even though you're minus Bauer, you're minus Kershaw. You've still got Scherzer, and that's the reason you got him, to be that number one horse. You've got Buehler, about as good a number two as you could expect. And then Urias, who all he did is win 20 games and had a sub-3 ERA this year. The thing I found puzzling was this opener. And not only from the opener standpoint, they got away with it a couple times, but I'm looking at a young Urias thinking, I just won 20 games with a 2.9 ERA. Why are they using an opener on my game? I think that gets into your mind and can be a mental block. If I'm 25 years old and I just won 25 games with a 2.9 earning, and they're starting an opener, that's going to get on my subconscious. Like, what's going on? Then all of a sudden they bring him into a late game situation. He gives it up a little bit. To me, that rocks the psyche of a young player. And I don't think they should have done it. It's easy to say when I'm not sitting on that bench with the temperature of that team every day. But from an outsider, I'm going, I just start Scherzer, Buehler, and Urias, and I roll through this. And I don't care if it's on 3 days rest. That's why I got these guys. That adrenaline, when you get to this stage of the season, you've got a lot more energy than the body should have after the war you just went through, 162 in the first round of the playoffs. I was puzzled by that, why there was so much posturing, why they're bringing Scherzer out of the pen. You had the best team, just set it up 1, 2, 3 and go. And, there's always going to be the critics. Easy for me to critique now where they're bumped from the postseason, but I'm very disappointed with that.
How many World Series should this roster have won? I mean, they only won the one last year. They've been good for a number of years. It seems like every year they just come up short too quickly.
Well, that's true. But if you look, you go back into the 90s and, which is arguably the Atlanta Braves of the 90s. And we had guys come and go. You had the Steve Averys, you had the Denny Nagels, you had the Kevin Millwoods for that Atlanta ball club in the 90s. But you had the constant, and that was Maddox, Smoltz, Glavine. In my opinion, the best rotation in the history of the game. Now, that's going to be argued by a lot of people from past generations, but it's definitely in the argument. They were the best. They won one World Series championship in the 90s, and I think they went to the postseason every year. So it just shows you Major League Baseball. I have so much respect, not only for how hard it is to get to the World Series, but when you get there, how hard it is to finish the deal. I played with so many great players over the years, and some of them didn't even get a chance. The greatest player I ever played with never got to go to a World Series. And when I say that, I mean Ken Griffey Jr. So I don't take this for granted. Like, oh, you get there, you got the greatest team, you should win. I know how hard it is. I've been there with great teams, and I got my butt kicked. So I really don't get into that. Right place, right time. Those great Yankee teams of the late 90s, man, they rattled off 4. That's beyond unbelievable to me. Awesome. But I don't take for granted. It doesn't matter how good your team is. I went through the 2001 season with that unbelievable Mariner team. And, a lot of that gets brought up in the postseason. The best team doesn't always win. Man, if any year we should have won, it was a foregone conclusion with the magic carpet ride we were on in 2001. Like, well, we kind of have to play the games. It's a formality, but the way this season's going, we already won that trophy. And the next thing you know, I'm sitting on a bus getting escorted home from Yankee Stadium with a loss, looking at my teammates like, did that just happen? So, man, this game is tough. It's hard, but that's why baseball is the greatest game in the world, in my opinion.
Who's to blame for the White Sox quick exit?
Players. It's always on, and there's so much made of the manager, and the bottom line is, at the end of the day, we are responsible for wins and losses. And Johnny, I played on a lot of teams, and I can count on one hand the amount of games that I played that I was sitting around after the game talking to my teammates saying, man, Skipper really screwed us today. It begins and ends with the players. We either get out there and perform or we don't. Yeah, once in a while, you'll question a manager's decision process, and you brought him in, you should have brought him in. Yeah, that's apples and oranges. That doesn't really matter in the big scheme. It's on the players. You either bring it or you don't bring it. I was a big fan of the Chicago White Sox team all year. You had Tony La Russa coming in. There was a lot of criticism on both sides. I like the move. I like bringing that purist baseball mentality and mixing in the modern day technology and the analytical side. I think Tony was willing to do that. Tony wasn't going to come in and run this team like he ran the 88 Oakland A's. He knows it's 2021. You can't run it like that. These players nowadays won't accept that. I think Tony was well received. I think he did a heck of a job. And because baseball's hard, that starting rotation that was so good all year just didn't step up and didn't get it done.
You think he deserves to return as manager, LaBrusa?
Without a doubt. And if I know Tony, he's going to want to return. He's not going to want to end this way. He's got that ball club. He knows they're talented. He knows they're really good. And he wants to bow out on top. And so I think without a doubt, he deserves to return and make a run. And I think if it's all up to Tony, which we don't know. I don't know the inner workings over there in the Chicago White Sox, but I definitely think he's going to be up for the challenge of at least one more year. At his age, anything could change his mind one way or the other. Family matters. He's been around so long. He's won so much. But I think he wants to finish it with this ball club currently in Chicago. I love that team. Maybe this wasn't the year, but maybe next year is.
What do you think about their core? I mean, a lot of people have said 3 to 7 year window for the White Sox, and people have also said that this could just be a growing experience, and next year is the real year for them. What do you think about that?
I could be. It definitely could be. I think you saw some positive things. I think going into the season, there were real high expectations, and a lot of the analysts predicted, Giolito is going to win the Cy Young. Well, you had some guys emerge on that team that you didn't expect. Rodon, is that how I pronounce it? What a great year he came from out of nowhere. Who would have thought that Keuchel wouldn't even be on the postseason roster? Because they had 4 guys that were more formidable than him. So I think you had a lot of positive things emerge this year. You had a couple injuries that really set you back with that great, I think it's going to be a phenomenal center fielder, and Robert Jimenez coming back late. So you had some things go wrong, but you had some positive things, and take that and maybe make a tweak here and a tweak there. I think going into spring training next year, a lot of people are going to be picking that Chicago White Sox team to make another run at it. But what we said earlier and what we talked about, man, baseball's fickle. This is really hard. Nothing's for sure. You could have all the horses and not win. I think the Dodgers are proving that right now.
Bret Boone here on Sports Talk Chicago. Bret, what do you make of the Padres interviewing Ozzie Guillen?
Interesting. I just heard that. And, I was a teammate with Ozzie on that 99 Braves team. He was at the end of his run as a player. He was an extra player for us. He was watching Bobby Cox a lot. And I could tell that he had managing in the big leagues in his future on his mind. Ozzie's Ozzie, it's going to have to be the right place. It's going to have to be management and Ozzie are on the same page. I think Ozzie brings a lot of positive things to the mix. A lot of Latin influence. He knows these guys well. You got Machado, Tatis. You got a great core in San Diego. What happened to them this second half? I don't think anybody saw coming. They had a really good bullpen. They had a really good lineup. Now, the Myers of the world, who previously had a great year, Hosmer at first base, who they counted on a lot, didn't have a big year, but the big stars, Machado, Tatis, they did. I think you got a really good group there. I think they were subject to being in the toughest division in baseball, and that's the National League West, with the Giants and the Dodgers running away with the 106 and the 107. So it was a tough division, but the way they fell this year, it was shocking to me, actually. You had the Yu Darvish, had a great first half. It was nowhere to be seen the second half. I think Snell coming over from Tampa Bay, they had huge expectations. He had some glimpses of that Snell from Tampa Bay late in the season, but it was kind of too late. Musgrove was a huge find for them, and he was the anchor of that staff. Lamet, that's going to be interesting how he comes back. He was in and out of the rotation in the bullpen. So a healthy Lamet really is going to add to that starting rotation. I think they have a few tweaks to make, but maybe Ozzie's the guy. Maybe that fiery shoot from the hip, One thing Ozzie's not going to do, he's not going to hold back. He's going to let you know what he's feeling. If he can get on the same page with that management, I think there could be a lot of things with Ozzie, but there's a lot of things that come with Ozzie too. And I think both sides have to calculate the positives from the negatives. I see a lot of positives and I see a few things that could come up. We'll see. Ozzie hasn't managed in a while. And Johnny, we all, as we get older, we learn lessons. We think, oh man, if I was in that position 5 years ago, I wish I would have done this instead of that. That's called life and moving forward. I think Ozzie has learned from some of his mistakes and he's grown from them. We all mature. We're all still learning. So I welcome it if it's a great fit for them and management's on the same page as he has as far as how this team will go forward.
Let me ask you this. What would you look for in a managerial candidate for the Padres? What do they need as a team from a manager this year?
Well, I mean, the obvious choice is a Bruce Bochy if he's willing to come back. Once again, I like putting that classic baseball manager in there. I think in the game of baseball, what I see in 2021, I see a lot of technology that we didn't have, a lot of analytical, a lot of things that are really advantages. And in some capacities, I'm a bit jealous that I didn't play in this generation with everything I have at my fingertips. You know, I was always looking to gain an edge where I can find, and whether that's video or analytical data, I think it's all positive. That being said, you can go too far with it in sports. Sports aren't they're a business and they're big business now. We have to accept that. But I don't think you can run a sports franchise strictly on a math problem. You know, if you open a business and you say it pencils out and here's our bottom line and here's what we're going to spend, you can kind of predict what your profit's going to be. Baseball, you can't predict because you're dealing with human beings and emotions and different guys. There's different sets of rules for different guys. There's different temperaments. There's a look, there's a twinkle in your eye. When you ask somebody a question, how does he answer it? That's part of my calculations on what decision I'm going to make right here. Am I going to keep you in the game? Am I going to take you out of the game? That's all the human aspect that can't come out in a math problem. I think guys like Ozzie, guys like Tony La Russa, guys like Bruce Bochy, I think they bring that good, solid baseball man mentality back to the game, coupled with analytics. I think there's a healthy mix in there, the ultimate mix. I think Ozzie would be good for the game.
Has baseball changed too much to you?
I think history will judge that. I don't think it's for us. I always knew as a player, the previous generation seemed to be awful hard on whatever the current generation is. You know, I'd have arguments with my father and my grandfather, and Ted Williams and Mickey Mantle. They're the best. In my dad's era of Mike Schmidt and Steve Carlton are the best. Well, Dad, I never wanted to be that guy. I always wanted to roll with it. I think the current players can learn a lot from my generation, from my dad's generation. That being said, I think my dad's generation, my generation can learn a lot from these current players. You know, I have a young son that just finished his first year in A-ball, and some of the things he brings home to me and says, Dad, what do you think about this? And I say, wow, I wish I would have had that available when I was playing. I think that's a great insight. So I think we can all learn from each other. Certain parts of me say, yes, they're changing a little too much, too fast, because it's still baseball. You know, we got to keep that purity. I don't like the rules about you got to tag them and you have to stay on the bag at second base and nobody can take me out and I can't take the catcher out. That's what baseball is, you know, and I take it a little bit personal as a second baseman, because in order for me to be great, I earned my stripes by being able to hang in there in the bottom of the ninth inning and turn that big time double play when Kirk Gibson was trying to knock my butt into left field. That's what separated the great second basemen from the mediocre. Nowadays, I can throw a third baseman over there because they have to slide straight into the bag. Third baseman can make a double play pivot, where that was something that really separated you in the past. So personally, I don't like that stuff. I like to keep it as pure as we can. the replays. Yeah, I think it's important now. I like the replay when you hit a foul home run and they can replay it. Let's get that thing right. That bang, bang play at first base that decides a series. If we can replay it, I think that's good for the game. But going too far with it, with the robo umps and all that stuff, man, I want to keep that human element and that thing that makes baseball great. I think we need to keep some of those things and not just change everything. We don't need a perfect product. We need a human product that people can relate to. That human interaction between umpire and player, that's important for the fabric of this game. And to just go into a robot world and everything's got to be perfect, I don't think that's great. And I think that argument and that debate that on human element issues are so cool and what makes sport. And I think we have to keep don't disregard the future and what's out there and things we can use to be better players and a better game, but don't change it too much either.
Bret Boone, still here on Sports Talk Chicago. Bret, a few more questions before we finish up. First off, the Boone Podcast. How's it been going?
It's been going good. I've been having a lot of fun with it, being on this side of the microphone. It's a little different for me, but as I've gotten into it further and further, I've enjoyed it. And from catching up with old friends to just hearing their take of their careers, and I get guys from so many different genres and so many different. I branched out and I'm doing some football now, and I'm going to have some basketball coming, but. I can do a Jim Palmer, and it really helps me on the history of the game, because as we prepare for these interviews and we go in and we read Wikipedia and I was going through Jim Palmer, and I've known Jimmy forever. He's been the Orioles announcer, and I kidded with him. I said, Jim, it's been a while since you sat in my locker and wore me out when I come to Baltimore and ask me 52 million questions. But going through his resume and just seeing, wow, this guy was unbelievable. He won 20 games 8 times in the 70s. He pitched in the last game that Sandy Koufax pitched in. And give me a little insight what that was like. So the neat parts are talking to guys like that. And then once in a while I'll have a guy that's currently playing and to get his perspective. What did you think about the generation before you? What do you think about what's going on now? So I've had a lot of fun with it. And we'll see where it goes, however long I'm going to go. It's a lot of work. As you know, I got 2 guests a week, and booking the guests is half the battle.
What's the most fascinating story you've heard on the podcast?
Man, I've heard a lot. Oh, you know what? Recently I had Pat Burrell on, and he told me a recruiting story about, he went to the University of Miami, and for the people that know, Pat ended up being a 1-1. He was the first overall pick in the draft. But he told me, he said, Boone, it was weird. He said, I wasn't a big prospect out of high school. Not too many schools were offering me scholarships. He said, I flew to the University of Miami, and there was a hotshot pitcher. He was 6'4", left-handed pitcher. He had full rides from everybody. And he said, I was having a tough time getting any rides. He said, so we were out in a boat in Miami, and the head coach came up to me and he said, yeah, I want to offer you a 95% scholarship. And Pat said, as soon as he said that, nobody had offered me that, he says. And he says, I took it on spot. And come to find out, the head coach, I don't know if they were drinking, what they were doing, had mixed up Pat and this left-handed pitcher. He meant to offer the left-handed pitcher 95. Pat took it. The guy said he couldn't take it back because he had offered it to him. And the rest is history. So by mistake, he offered him a full ride, basically. And kind of was like, no, I meant to get the pitcher. The pitcher ended up going to Stanford. Pat, the rest is history, becomes an All-American, #1 pick overall, one of the greatest college baseball players ever, all by a misunderstanding. So stuff like that is cool. And I just laugh about it. Like, wow, I didn't know that, so little stories like that, fun.
And Bret, before we finish up today, last question, your reaction to your brother's walk-off homer in the ALCS for the Yankees was what?
Well, I was in the booth, and I was with, it was Joe Buck, Tim McCarver, and myself. And, I was a current player. So I was really uncomfortable in that booth being critical of the current players because I knew, that was the one where Pedro was throwing behind hitters, and they put me on the spot and they'd say, Boone, what do you think? And I'm going, oh no, I got to face Pedro in 3 months. Of course he tried to hit him on purpose, but that was the challenges of being in the booth as a current player and having to critique the guys that you play against on a daily basis. But I remember going into that game, Aaron was really scuffling, and I was, up in the booth, not saying much. And I was getting a lot of grief from my teammates. Are you ever going to speak? And I remember I got to the ballpark and he wasn't in the starting lineup. And I said, wow, I wonder how he's going to react to this, because I knew he was having a really tough time. And I saw him come on deck and I thought, wow. And I call him Arnie. I said, Arnie, man, just do something. Hit a sac fly. Just have a good AB. Because I had told him the night before, I've been there. I've done that. I've had rough series. And if you do something little tonight, turn a big double play, hit a sacrifice fly, you guys win this series and go on to the World Series, they're going to forget how bad you were this series. And I remember him on deck and just kind of closing my eyes, like, come on, help him out, because I know he's struggling right now. Wakefield's in the game. I said, maybe this is what he needs. Not your traditional overhand fastball slider. Maybe he needs a wiffle ball coming up there. And he got in the box and he hit that homer. And as soon as he hit it, I knew it was way out. And I just went, wow, how cool is that? And I had nothing to say. And I remember we have the earpieces, and I got the director downstairs saying, what are you doing? What are you doing? You got to say something. You got to say something. And that was a legitimate reaction. I just thought, I have nothing to say. Words can't describe what I'm feeling right now. I got like butterflies. I was so happy for him running around those bases that I was a loss for words. And then the director came in my ear. He goes, no, that's perfect. Less is better. Less is better. So I really didn't care at that time. That's just how I was feeling. But pretty darn cool. I went down to the locker room after, and that's one thing I would never do, go into that Yankees locker room. That's the enemy territory, and I would never do that. Although I respected a lot of guys on that team. It wasn't a personal thing. It's just, you don't go into that locker room. You don't go into the enemy's locker room. But that night I made an exception. I had to kind of go in there and give him a hug. I walked in, I remember, I think it was Giambi and him, and they were drinking champagne. And I just went up in my suit. I gave him a hug and I said, hey man, I'm so proud of you. I'm so happy for you. And I remember them going, hey, you got to stick around. And I said, I got to get out of here. You're still the enemy. And I left the locker room, but it was a really cool moment.
Well, Bret, thank you so much for joining me. Always a pleasure. Best wishes with the Boone Podcast, and can't wait till we catch up again real soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks.